The Dodge 3/4 ton truck never really seems to get quite the level of recognition it deserves, at least compared to its larger and smaller colleagues, the Deuce and a Half and the Jeep. It was rugged, dependable, capable, and produced in vast numbers. As a result, at the end of the war, it's perhaps not surprising that a search for a replacement vehicle was undertaken. Design started in 1948, and Dodge decided not to mess with success. The new vehicle would have a lot in common with the WC series of World War II. Early 1950, prototypes were presented to the US Army for evaluation, and by December 1950 they had been approved for production. Now, the Army was evidently getting a little bit fed up of all the various different nomenclatures that each individual company was putting forward. So the new truck got an M series designation, the M37. What we have here is the ambulance version, the M43, and this is a lovely example. It's at the Rock Island Auction Company, and they'll be putting it up for sale next month, at least hopefully next month by the time this video gets edited. It differs from the M37 in a couple of respects. Firstly, it has many red crosses. Secondly, the wheelbase is 14 inches longer. It's 126 inches versus the 112 on the M37. And finally, the rear springs are also beefed up. Now, this vehicle is presenting me with a bit of a problem because it's a truck. The civilian version is a Dodge Power Wagon. It's got no armor for me to talk about. It's got no weapons system for me to expound upon. If the truck's on fire, getting out is pretty easy. In fact, there's not very much for me to do except wander around and marvel at, well, frankly, how pretty this little truck is. However, I shall start at the front as ever, and we'll see how we do. Starting as ever at the front corner of the vehicle, a siren is mounted on the front right fender, and this vehicle has both a siren and a horn. Service lights, well, they're behind the brush guards. Now, the manual is fairly unique that I haven't come across another manual which shows how you aim the headlights. And apparently the way you bore sight these things is you put a screen 25 feet in front, you aim the one headlight at a certain marker point on that screen, and then you adjust the other headlight to mesh correctly. You'll also find indicator marker lights. On the far side, you'll have your blackout drive. Down below, of course, we have the bumper with the winch. Now, not all ambulances came with a winch, and it actually comes with a downside as well because it shoves the bumper further forward, and that reduces your angle of approach, makes it a little bit less capable off-road. The winch itself, well, the drive shaft, according to the manual, is manufactured by a company called Blood Brothers, which is a bit ironic on an ambulance. The winch is rated for about 7,500 pounds, although you can play with that with a block and tackle, what have you. To ensure you don't go too far over that, the system has a shear pin, and what a shear pin does is it breaks before the winch does. It's basically a pin that holds the whole system together, and if there's too much force on it, snap. Yeah, you got to replace the shear pin, and yeah, you probably have to find little pieces of metal all over the system, but it's easier than replacing the entire winch. In the event that the shear pin does break, whatever it was that you were winching up a hill is liable to go careening down the hill. So to stop that, there's actually an emergency brake latch that will engage and hopefully avert completely embarrassing disasters. The wheels are held on by nuts which vary by side. On the left-hand side of the vehicle, they are left-hand threads. There are shock absorbers, front and rear. They are different. They are stamped, front and rear. And the axles are described in the manual as being of a free-floating hypoid type. And I'm just going to have to Google that later. The brake system is drum brakes. It's a hydraulic system, pretty much standard for a commercial vehicle you might find. Ground clearance, 10 3/4 inches, and the turning circle is 50 feet. The tires, 9x16. They're normally inflated to 40 psi, although off-road you could drop down as far as 15. Last item on the left-hand side, receptacle for slave cables. The M43 was a little bit unique in the M37 series in that it had the spare tire mounted on the driver's side door. I guess they figured the driver didn't have to get out all that much. It would be the passenger who would be doing the dismounting. This makes life a little bit annoying for the driver though. Getting in isn't too complicated. You push down on the lever, you can swing the tire out, and then open the door. At which point I will take advantage to point out this device here, that it's one of these lovely phrases in the Army. It is the door glass regulator handle. Most people call it a window. I called it a window handle when I was growing up, but it is the door glass regulator handle according to the manual. Down underneath you got access ports if you have to do any adjustment or inspection of the door glass regulator handle system. Anyway, closing it up is easy as well. I have no doubt that occasionally drivers would simply hit the gas and let momentum close it. Now this is easy enough for the outside, but once you're inside, getting out is a bit of a problem. Because in order to access this lever here, you must use your door glass regulator handle, lower the window all the way down, lean out and over, and then start pushing. It's probably easier just to get out the passenger side. Hopefully your truck's not on fire. Moving further to the rear, there is a small compartment here for BII service items. Not quite as clean as the outside, but anything that goes in there is probably muddy and greasy anyway. And so at the rear of the vehicle, the fuel tanks, 24 gallons. The vehicle does 9 miles to the gallon, so you can do the math yourself. It's located basically encompassed by the frame in between the rear diff and the rear bumpers. Earlier vehicles had a fuel filter together with also a primer pump in the engine compartment. Later vehicles, the fuel filter was inside the fuel tank, and what you'd have to do is you'd lift up the flooring inside and you can access it that way. This is, if you're curious, it looks like an earlier vehicle built in 1951. As you come around to the back of the vehicle, under the jerry cans, these taillights should be familiar to anybody who's been in the US military between the Korean War and the end of the Cold War, if not even later. Marker light, and then of course you have the towing pintle. I'm not sure quite what an ambulance is going to tow, but hey, you can do it. It probably didn't cost all that much to add. Also, because it's an ambulance, you have these wonderful large barn doors. You can see there is also a drop step to help everybody get in and out. The glass would often come with blackout curtains that you could roll down and you can travel your ambulance in the dark. The right side, well, your exhaust pipe, another compartment for BII, and the passenger's door. And this brings us right back to the front again. So now we open the hood. It's actually very simple to open. There's little latches on each side. Straight up. And it is held in place by two supports. This is the Dodge T245, and that is also the code name for the vehicle series internal to the company. They didn't use the M series. It's a 230 cubic inch plant, L-head, inline 6-cylinder, water-cooled petrol. Cranks out 94 horsepower at about 3,400 RPM and was solid, dependable and rugged. It was powerful enough to get the vehicle to the maximum allowable speed of 55 miles an hour in high range, and in low range it will do 28. The cooling system, it takes 17 quarts. Usually it was as part of a unit with the engine, so if you're pulling out the engine, you'll pull out the cooling system along with it. Not much else to be said. Let's lower the hood and we'll have a look inside. And so we come to the crew compartment. The seats will fold forwards, and you can see there's a little bit of stowage underneath there. Also on the passenger side, now on most of the M37 series, under the passenger seat will be located the batteries. However, some of the early production model ambulances, the batteries are actually located further back under the bed. So taking care not to catch yourself on this annoying piece of metal, which is taking a good gouge out of my skin. Let's see. I like this. You have a lot of fun driving this. Anyway, so once I'm in, nice and comfy, again, there are panels everywhere with publication numbers, the pattern for the shifting and what have you. Now, the transmission is simple enough. It's a 4-speed with reverse. You have your handbrake as the next one along. Then you have the transfer case and the front wheel engage. So it's high range or low range, but you'll note that you cannot engage the front wheels unless you also engage low range. So there's no 4-wheel drive high-speed driving. The controls for the lights, well, I've seen them many times before, not much point in going over them. The dash is very sensible, although it's off to the side. And of course there is a glove compartment for your co-driver. You will note that the windows will open, so you can unlock them and then they will slide forwards if you want a little bit of fresh air as you're driving. There's a control handle up on the ceiling for the spotlight, and well, that's pretty much it. It's a truck. My door glass regulator handle. It regulates the door glass. Now this footrest is actually very clever. It's not just a footrest. If you lift it up, this also becomes the attendant's seat. I feel like everybody loves a medic. I mean, we all rib each other, you know, infantry and armor rib each other. You know, we all rib on artillery, and everybody ribs on the MPs for some reason. But the medics are excluded from that. And any medic, no matter how basically trained, they always go by the nickname Doc. Otherwise, well, it's painted nice and bright, so you can see there are 2 lights. There's a dome light and there is a surgical light, which actually will fold down when you switch it on. Very clever system. Personnel heater, so you're not too cold. And of course the litters. There are 2 per side on a dismantleable rack. So that's pretty much it. Between 1951 and 1968, over 111,000 of the M37 series vehicles were built, and they soldiered on for quite a long time. The supposed replacement, the 5-quarter-ton Jeep by Kaiser, that didn't really work out, and especially for the ambulance, the cross-country ambulance is going to be the M792 Gamma Goat, and many of us know how that one ended up. It wasn't really until the Humvee came out in the 1980s that you really came up with a worthy successor for the Dodge. Anyway, that's it. Nice and simple. It's a truck. And I guess we'll find out in a few weeks who gets to take this one home. I'll see you later. It's rated for 7,500 pounds. Now, of course, this could be increased by the use of tackles and pulleys and whatever. But the winch itself is rated for 7,500 pounds. And of course, the diagonal tract of 3. There is a shear pin in the system. Now, what a shear pin is so let's hop in. What the frig was that? It's gonna fucking bleed. Oh. That's gonna bleed a lot. So, taking care not to kill yourself on this thing, which is just taking a good gouge out of my skin. The maximum allowable speed is 55, 25. Then you've got these lovely big barn doors. Once you have